So I want to expand on my last video about how all exercise is made up. And I'm going to talk a bit about how some studies are just kind of unhelpful and used for fear mongering, and how they're just kind of misinterpreted about what they show and what their limitations from their findings actually are. So it'll be a fun one. I'm also recovering from a bit of a cold, and I've had a migraine all day. So this workout might just be a little bit more about moving and doing what I can. Probably not going to give a huge effort today. I also still have to get out and do groceries, so really just going to kind of move and talk, have some fun. Yeah, so like I said, all exercise is just made up, so there's not necessarily like movements that are bad. Your body's made to move in all different ways and all sorts of ways, and it has joints to do that and has degrees of freedom in those joints to allow for all different kinds of ranges of motion, right? So it just becomes about finding that entry point that's like within your capacity. So not overloading your tissues, right? Or not going above what you can handle. And in terms of pain, it also comes down to kind of like the psychological too. So you have to take into account your beliefs, like kind of what you've been told growing up, how you've had to just move growing up too. So there's a lot that goes into pain that's not as simple as just the biomechanical or physical factors that I think get missed a lot in the discussions when they're like, oh, you have to keep your back straight and do this or that. It's like, well, one, that advice isn't really accurate, and two, they're just missing out on so much more to it. Anyways, I'm going to turn the music down a little bit and then I'm going to hit this set. Yeah, head's not feeling amazing, but overall that didn't really make it feel worse. So I'm going to go up to 170. I'll probably just call it there and do a few doubles just to kind of move. So you may be thinking, like, what is this concept of load management that I'm talking about? And it's pretty self-explanatory. It's just managing the load, right? It's not edging or anything like that. It's just like, okay, what can my body handle? So I'm going to load it appropriately for that. If you take rounding your back and you never round your back and you're always trying to keep that straight back and you're hyper aware of it and hyper fixated on trying not to bend your spine, which has a bunch of joints and is made for movement, then when you go to deadlift, near your max, let's say you just have a max of 450 pounds, you're doing sets with like 410 or something, or 400, and you round your back for, like, you get out of position, you fully fatigue, you're halfway through the rep and you just fully round your back. Well, if you never round your back and you've never built up strength for it, then you're way above your capacity, and that is absolutely terrible load management. So that's where you might run into problems. Or if you just do that movement constantly and don't let your body recover, so if you do it every day and you're just like, okay, I'm going to do this movement every single day, and you're not letting the like collagen tissues recover, they take a little bit more time, and your muscles aren't recovering either, then you're probably going to have pain and injury, because that's terrible load management. So like with load management, you can change the load, the speed, how many reps you're doing, how many sets you're doing, the frequency throughout the week at which you're doing the movement. There's a lot of different things you can change to bring it to within your capacity, so it's a lot more manageable on your body, and that really decreases injury risk. Now, you don't want to bring it down so much that you're always just like working easy and being like, oh, I'm pain-free because I never work hard. No, like, still work hard, but don't be, like, soft like that and just not work hard. Like, still push your body, but just understand that, okay, I need to build up capacity in all these different areas, and if you're feeling like you're kind of getting worn out, then it's like, okay, well, maybe I can take a little bit of time. Injuries do happen, pain does happen, it's okay, and it's not the end of the world, and it doesn't mean that a movement's bad. It just means that, like, okay, like, that was the limit for your body at that time. That's okay. You can build that up. It's actually good to kind of learn that sometimes, and you can learn the skill of dealing with an injury and pain, both physically and mentally. But that's a whole other topic. Yeah, so just like, understand your body, understand that all movements are okay. You just need to find like what's within your capacity, and then slowly, progressively load it over time to tie in, another video topic I talked about. But yeah, if you just build it up over time, then you're going to be able to do way more movements and you're going to be way more resilient. Like I got this comment that heavy bending and twisting are bad. I do that shit all the time, like, but guess what? I started with just the bar. Actually, I started with less than a standard bar. I started with a 20-pound bar. So it's like, I found what was comfortable for me. I let my mind get used to it, my body get used to it, and then I slowly built it up over time. So it's not like I just jumped into doing it with 160 kilos. Like, I started light and then did that. The body can adapt to that. So, anyways, I need to get going to this next set so that I can finish my workout before I need to get groceries. So, time to stop yapping. I'm also messing around with moving my stance out a little bit. So, day like today where I'm limited by other things, so I can't really push it, I think is the perfect time to kind of play around with it and get a little bit comfortable, and then see if that can take me a little farther. I've always just felt more explosive and strong with my feet narrow, but I'm wondering if I can grind through things a little bit better at the top end with a slightly wider stance. Might be a little bit more comfortable. Yeah, something to play around with. Never bad to just try new things. Just kidding. The migraine is hitting with a sweet vengeance right now. So if I keep going, I think I'm going to get more nauseous and I won't really be able to do anything else for the day. So groceries take priority. Can't push myself through the workout. That's okay. I'll be back tomorrow, but I'm just going to kind of ramble here. So continuing on with like how any movement's okay, I want to talk about how there's certain studies that show, there's more force going through X, Y, or Z when you do this exercise or in this position, and those get used to kind of demonize those movements and be like, oh, don't do this movement because it's bad for your elbows, it's bad for your knees, it's bad for your back because there's more force going through there. But they can't really be used to say that, and I think these studies largely are just kind of dumb. They have like clinical considerations when choosing exercise, but even then, you can just kind of lower the weight to the point where it's not really a big deal, or just go off of the patient's symptoms when they're doing the movement and see, okay, what's tolerable? Okay, then we'll start it there and then build it up. So they have limited benefit. They're just kind of studies. And I think a lot of the time it's just that studies need to be done and people are focusing on the wrong thing. What I like to do when I see these studies is actually just think like, awesome, I'm going to do that exercise then because that means I'm going to be even more resilient to that movement. My elbows are going to be even stronger. My back's going to be even stronger. My knees are going to be even stronger. I just need to start at the right level where it's not too much for my body at that moment and then build it up. So a little bit of a different mindset around it and actually understanding what the limitation of that study is and what the limitation of those results are and not listening to the fear mongering that often comes from it. So they're used to create a lot of fear and demonize movements and often like sell like, hey, you need to see me because I can teach you how to exercise right. You should be afraid of certain movements. I know what the perfect form is. You should see me so that I can help you. Oh, you're getting pain. You should see me and then I can rehab you because I know all these secrets. When in reality, that person's actually an idiot and they're just misinterpreting or rather like wrongfully extrapolating the results and wrongfully applying the results and not using that information properly and not understanding it in the greater context and not understanding kind of the complexity of injury and pain. And this kind of leads to a very, very prominent set of studies that I really kind of like to break down. And my page kind of does a lot of, with my rounded back lifting, is the McGill dead pig spine studies. So people love to use these, and people are always like, oh, rounding your back's bad because it leads to this delamination. You're going to break your discs and you're going to ruin your spine. But it's like, it's based off of these studies. They take dead pig spine segments, just the segments, they cut all the muscles off around them, they bend them back and forth 1 second for a full bend, well beyond their normal range of motion for up to 24 hours. There's compression for force and then bending it back and forth, which is like, okay, that's cool. This study can only be used to show that, hey, at some point doing that, at that rigorous amount, that spine is going to break. So they just took these spine segments and beat the absolute shit out of them until they broke. And then they use that to be like, don't round your back. Rounding your back's bad. Is it? Do you understand how that doesn't apply to a living human spine that has adaptable tissue? There's studies in rowers showing chemical markers for adaptation. There's studies in weightlifters showing that they have bigger discs. There's studies in runners showing that they have bigger discs. It's like the study in powerlifters showing that the ligaments around the spine are more robust. It's like, well, you have all this other evidence that shows like, hey, the human body can adapt, and saying that discs don't adapt is kind of a knobhead take. But because there's this other evidence that, hey, they can adapt, maybe slower, so maybe you need to be considerate about that. But so it's like taking that study and the results and then wrongfully extrapolating it and applying it terribly just to fearmonger. Whether it's done on purpose or not, that's up for debate, and that depends on the person. Some people might be like, well, that's ridiculous, but it gets me people, so I'm going to do it. But that's a whole other rant. But yeah, got to know the limitations of these studies. That's why it's important to actually read them, and actually understand what they say. And then there's these other studies showing like, oh, well, like people have to say when you're rounding your back, there's more shear force going through your back. In some segments that's true, in some it's not. The results aren't consistent with between some studies. And like I said before, that just means, okay, cool, there's more force there. Well, the body's going to adapt to that. So it just means there's more force there. It doesn't mean that it's bad. It doesn't mean that it's injurious. And you just need to work within your capacity for the load. It's like you take people who can deadlift 1,000 pounds and you just think, oh, they were just born with the discs to be able to handle that. Like, this is what I'm talking about. Just think. Please, just take a split second to fucking critically think. This makes me so mad. It's like, how do people who just lack this extreme ability to critically think and apply things, you ask like one question and then it's like everything starts falling apart. But it's like, what do you seriously believe that, any person who lifts a certain amount of weight is just born with the disc that can handle that? Okay, I mean, have fun in your delusional world. But anyways, so what was I going with that point? Those studies can't really be used to say, hey, rounding your back is bad. They're more so just saying, hey, at some point, if we bend these dead pig spine segments under compression back and forth for 1 second, if we do that, at some point, these discs break. Cool. That means fuck all for me. That means fuck all for the human spine that's in a living person that loads it not like that and then rests and adapts. So think a little bit. I guess that's the point of all this. And there's one last thing about discs that I want to talk about. Everyone loves to be like, oh, they're avascular. Well, one, they aren't actually avascular. The vascularity of them changes throughout life, so you have to be a little bit more specific about what kind of disc you're talking about. The outer third is vascularized, and it changes also with like degeneration status or injury status as well. That is used to kind of be like, well, vascularization means that it's bad, right? You don't want that. The healthy disc, which is just kind of chilling, has vascularization here. People just kind of tend to have said that and then just accept this. That means healthy. If there's vascularization, that means unhealthy. I like to say, well, what happens, when you start working out and building your muscles? What happens when your tendons adapting? Oh, you have vascularization. What is that? Why? Well, vascularization helps to bring nutrients to the area, right? Blood supply. And it helps to take waste out. So certain tissues die or get injured, yes. That happens with any loading, but then new nutrients are brought so that new tissues can kind of form and the existing structures can get stronger. So it's kind of a flip from, hey, vascularization means bad to vascularization just means there's changes, right? You see it in a growing disc and you see it in a degenerating disc. So you see it in a disc that's getting stronger and you see it in a disc that's kind of like, well, these tissues are dying, so the body needs to get those tissues out of there. So vascularization isn't necessarily a sign of an unhealthy disc, it's a sign of a changing disc. That can be for the good, right? That can mean, hey, there's adaptation happening here. Oh, yeah, sure, you had a little bit of a tear in your disc, and now there's vascularization there so that it can heal it up and build it up stronger. Okay, cool. Now it's a matter of, okay, well, if you go too far, yeah, there's injury, but then if you don't go far enough, there's not that adaptation. So you got to stress it so that it builds up, right? And that would be interesting to see how certain loading programs and like certain activity levels affect vascularization of the disc. But again, it's used to be like, well, it's not well vascularized, so you don't want to use it. Well, it's not well vascularized when it's just kind of chilling and not doing much and just kind of at a resting state. But if it's growing, maybe it's more well vascularized, right? Like maybe there's better blood flow to it when you're actually kind of loading it and getting it to adapt. That's the last thing that I kind of want to just leave people to think about. It's like, critically think things through. Think about all the different possibilities that there could be. There tends to be a bias towards just thinking, okay, one thing that was said, now let's just stick with that instead of being like, well, what else could it mean? What else does it mean elsewhere in the body? And then does that apply here? Um, and then, the general masses just kind of take bad things and just run with it. So that's a problem. But I'm hoping that I can change that a little bit and get you to think through things a little bit more and get you to kind of have a little bit more of an open mind and think, hey, maybe that isn't actually a bad thing. Maybe I do need to just load it a little bit. Maybe we need to look at vascularization of the disc a little bit more and change our thoughts on it as just one example, but along with many others. Anyways, I got to get groceries. Thank you for watching. I hope you learned something. Sucks that I couldn't work out more. Hoping to lift with all of you another time when I'm feeling a little bit better. Have a good one. Make some gains.